I think at the end of the day, the other thing that is most important is taking the time to figure out how can you learn more from other people that may be doing things creatively that you may be interested in, right? We talk to an unlimited amount of people. We try to give them as many examples as how you can go about doing that, because 9 times out of 10, you didn't grow up with that information, right? We didn't necessarily grow up with a lot of those networks. And so now it's important that either our generation shares that information back, or we can partner with these different corporations and organizations to make sure that information is readily available.
Today, we got my man, Bimma Williams, who's a 10-year creative industry leader and executive, currently a host of Claima, which is a career discovery podcast to help Black and Brown creatives discover their dream careers, which is rated #1 in iTunes. So he's kind of a big deal. He was also previously global entertainment marketing at Nike and global footwear product marketing at Yeezy, at Adidas, and has also held other creative roles at global brands. And so, Bimma, welcome.
How's it going? Thank you so much. I appreciate that intro, that all that
Yes.
love right there. And also thanks for allowing us to come on and sharing your platform and share a little bit about what we do.
100%. So I'm so interested in talking to you because there's this stronger than most people may realize bridge between the creative industries and technology. And whether you're talking about developing products, distributing products, collaborating with other people on products. And I wonder, from your perspective, how has technology changed the way creatives can monetize their intellectual property?
Oh my goodness, it's changed everything, right? If you think about it, we got to go back just a tiny bit before you could monetize whatever you were doing, right? And so I think back to the time of like, when we think about this creator kind of community that's happening in the midst of tech creator economy, there are times, you're talking like 2011, 2010 specifically, where, Facebook was maturing, Instagram's coming online, Twitter's pretty mature, and some of these other things starting to pop up. And at the time, people had like these big followings, but there was no way for you to really do anything from a monetization standpoint, right? Like you might get something here and there, but when you think about today and how those tools have really advanced to you can literally have like a Patreon account where you can get a subscription model going for you, and that becomes a business, right? Other than that, folks are selling merch, which is still a great, revenue generator for a business. But from a tech perspective, you weren't able to charge people a subscription seamlessly. You weren't able to have digital events where people could pay to attend those events. And then just the seamlessness of those services, it didn't exist at that time. And you think about now, Apple now doing that directly through Apple Podcasts from a tech side, right? Like these are leaps and bounds from where we were a decade ago.
I wonder your thoughts on, and I appreciate everybody at their whatever stage of the entrepreneurial journey they're on, but I wonder what do you think when you see people who may have in their bio, they're a designer or whatever, but the products may just be the t-shirt that they started off. And again, I appreciate everybody's journey because you got to start somewhere. But I wonder, like, at what point is somebody a bona fide designer? At what point am I at least in the direction of being like a Jeff Staple versus somebody who bought some Hanes t-shirts or some, you know what I'm saying, and put my logo on them and I'm selling them and it still has the tag from Hanes or American Apparel or whatever. Like at what point, from your perspective, and this is your perspective, is somebody really on the right road to becoming a real designer?
Right. So, one thing I want to touch on that you said is, at a certain degree, you could be a designer at multiple different levels, right? If you have a graphic that shows up on a t-shirt, you are a designer, and there's a space and a place for you to show up in the industry in different ways. When you think of the traditional word designer, and I think in this instance, if you're thinking about maybe the consumer that's looking at it versus the brand that's looking at it, the brand and working with partners, that typically comes down to like a product designer. Can you design a product from start to scratch that shows up as this new thing, right? And so when we think about, if you take it to a t-shirt, you could be considered a graphic designer if you design that graphic that shows up on that printed shirt. Another level of design is also a designer that decided like, hey, I like the way that shirt is, but I want to change the entire shape of that shirt. So you might come change, right? You might come change how, the shoulder lines fall here. You might change the width and the boxiness of the shirt. You might change, the size of the neckline, et cetera. Like those are different iterations of design. I think if you think about a Jeff Staple level designer, Jeff Staple is a designer that has been through multiple phases and iterations in his career, right? Jeff has a background in graphic design. Jeff has also now been able to jump into industrial and product design. I think he's even got projects where he's designed bikes now, right? It just comes from different levels of experience. And I'd also think you have to think about, if you're thinking about it from a career side, you have to also think about where you want to go. For example, if you want to design sneakers, right? That is a tangible product. It does not come from maybe veneering, which is what we consider when maybe you add colors to a retro sneaker like a Jordan, right? And now, if you have a totally new Jordan, like a Jordan 36, that likely went through a whole 18 month, 16 month, maybe even longer process to design with multiple people working on different parts of that sneaker.
Yeah, and we're going to come back to that because you just sparked so many ideas that come to me. But I wonder I want to continue setting the stage here before we go deeper into this. I wonder how a designer who's really putting the work, how do they become a brand? Because I think about like, what was the work like a Virgil Abloh did, or like a Daryl Brown, or said like, at what point are they a brand that broke out, got shelf space at Barney's or whatever? Like, at what point do you get to that? Like, what are the moves you have to make?
Right.
Or the person you need to know,
right?
What is it that gets me there?
Right. I think the two interesting things the one interesting thing that comes from the two folks that you just mentioned is that they came from under a certain designer and creative, and that designer and creative being Kanye West. And you have to think about, when you are building a brand, right, the benefit of being a brand yourself or being at a brand, if you're thinking about it through a business lens, is the visibility that brand can offer, right? The doors that brand can open, the conversations that you could be at, the tables that you could sit at, the tables that you could then build, right, after you've been through kind of that journey. And when I think of someone like Daryl, I think of someone like Virgil, the start of that was they had to set that foundation for being a designer. Like, where did they start to cultivate those initial skills, right? We know Virgil went to RISD. We know Daryl has his background. It had to start somewhere. So they had some sort of understanding about design to begin with. I think after you have that particular experience, you want to start to figure out, okay, how can I like get more experience that takes me a level above maybe, some of the other designers, because the space is crowded, right? There's a lot of folks that want to be in design. A lot of folks want to be creatives. A lot of folks want to be small business owners and entrepreneurs. And so if that next step for you is like, okay, how can I start to separate myself? Then naturally you're looking for experiences that are going to do that. That usually starts with a network, right? That next phase is a huge like separator from the pack. And it's all about what sort of network that you can get into. Some networks come from going to work at other brands. For example, I went to go work at Saucony, Adidas, and Nike. There's a certain thing that comes when you're able to get into that, because proximity puts you into certain circles. If you're thinking about a Daryl or a Virgil, you have to imagine, before we knew Virgil as Virgil today, Virgil was in the Yeezy and Kanye camp for several years and no one knew who he was. And at the time, Virgil is continuing to get more experience as a designer himself. He is also getting challenged with all these different creatives that come through that network of which he has been working with. And then in addition to that, he is getting, his own ideas about what it might look like for him to create his own brand. And when you think about a brand, a lot of times people think about brands and they're like, it's a logo. And they think it's a name. That's not a brand. Like, that's a logo. It's a design thing that tells you what the brand is. The brand is heart, right? The brand is purpose. The brand is, how do you make people feel? If we leave this call today and Will remembers nothing else, he remembers that I talked about careers. That's a brand. The brand is what you leave here on that person that you intend to connect with. That's what a brand is. And so when you think about Virgil, right? At this current point in time, his brand is always going to shift as a creative. That's what he should do. But his current brand sits around this kind of deconstruction of design, really demystifying, democratizing design, if you will. When you think about Daryl, he's really down this path of workwear and actually doing authentic workwear and coming from this different perspective. And so that's what brands are. It's not a name. It's what does it make that person feel? What is that takeaway when you're no longer in the room or in their presence?
But like at some point, there has to be where the name does hit an inflection point, because how do you get people to pay attention? So I imagined, and tell me if I'm wrong, but I imagine, I found out like Daryl's from my hometown, so I knew that. And so I'm like, but like when his stuff really hit, the upward trajectory is because I saw LeBron wearing it in a press conference. And so I'm like, so does you, and you talked about proximity. So is it that you need, because the marketplace is so crowded, do you need that cosigning?
You need a concert of cosigns is what I would call it, right? You need several things working for you almost simultaneously, right? In order to have that sort of that presence, right? For Daryl, it's a couple different things that happen, right? Like Daryl came into my mental when he was doing the hats, the Real Friends hats, right? So that was like one of the things that started to bubble and it started to circulate in the PR. But then, as you look at him now, he was a stylist for Kanye West for a certain point in time. So then you have that cosign that raises his profile a bit. And then he's seeding folks, and then he's developing relationships, and then he's doing partnerships with different brands. Those things actually start to propel you to a different lane. It's not just going to be that one LeBron seating that's going to do it. It's going to be the LeBron hit. And then it's going to be, oh yeah, this is the brand to watch because Complex just, listed Daryl as the brand to watch. And then, oh yeah, Kanye's wearing those pants that, Daryl just designed. And so it is always, I think Daryl is, working on a couple other projects too. Like it's always a concert of things. It's never just one thing. But if I'm talking to someone who is vastly interested in that, I would say, like it is your network, right? Do you have a network of other designers or a community of people that work in that fashion space that you can, send product to, get their feedback? If they like it, they might wear it, it might show up somewhere. That's great. Can you do collaborations with other people that is mutually beneficial? And it's not just about, oh, we did a collaboration and you want to show up on a site, we're kind of past that from a culture standpoint. Like that's been done before. Like what's the meaning behind that? And then storytelling. A lot of folks are really doubling down on how they storytell, how they bring these ideas of their brands to life, and those things start to circulate and gain attention. So I would say it's a concert of kind of those different ideas building momentum over time.
So I wonder how collabs work and how money is made. And so you think about some of the names we talked about, the Virgils, the Daryls, the Jeff Staples, et cetera, who have done collaborations with other brands. And one that specifically struck my interest when I was preparing for this talk was like the Lil Nas X and Mischief for the Demon shoe. And I wonder, number one, how do collaborations make money for the designer? And two, like the Mischief one was, and Nike said, we don't have anything to do with this. So how did they even get this? How did they get all of the sneakers to be able to, hack them up and then put it, like, how did that happen?
Yeah. So I would say that particular collaboration was more one of those black market collaborations, right? It's not anything that's officially done with a brand the size of Nike. So if you're going to do something like that, it's likely more so considered, though it's a collab here, you typically consider that just somebody customized sneakers and they sold them, separately on their own. I think not Lil Nas X and his team took it to a different place by putting a whole campaign around this. So essentially, the way they had to get those shoes is they likely had to go purchase those shoes off of retail 100%, unless they had some sort of connection and somebody, hooked them up with a discount from somewhere. But likely they bought those shoes 100% retail. After they bought all of those sizes, the company that was the customizer would literally have to by hand, or whatever team that they have would have to customize those shoes one by one. And then they put those sneakers up for sale. A project like that, I think they had under 1,000 pairs for those sneakers, right?
Yeah.
And then I think the price tag was somewhere around $200, $300. Yeah. And so it's a good bit of chunk of change. But if you're talking about, we look at the global sneaker market, you're talking billions and billions of dollars. In a large scale of things, that's not a huge chunk. For the team that customized those shoes, they made money because Lil Nas X team likely paid them a commission for being the designers behind that. If we think about that from a brand side and in the sneaker industry and how that works on that side, well, if you bring in someone like a Virgil or a Daryl, usually there's a design fee behind that, right? So that's how they automatically recruit or make money from that particular deal. Beyond that, depending on how things are negotiated and how they move forward, they may have, additional money that comes from the sale of those sneakers. And if you think about where collabs were back in the day, and you think about where collabs are now, collabs have become a part of what we consider in the industry like inline product. Like people buy collabs more than they buy, the white on white or the black on black Air Force One that's on the shelf. They want the Virgil. And so you see an off-white Air Force One in bigger volumes than we would ever have seen when, I was camping out for sneakers in, 2005 or whatever. Like it's a completely different scenario. And I think the other way that folks were making money, have been making money, and from those collabs is a lot of times those personalities and those individual brands also have their own retail. And so they would have an allocation of product that they could sell through their own channels, and they can make a bigger markup on that product. And so you got to be thinking a couple of different ways about how you would do that. But at the end of the day, collabs are starting to scale, right? They are volume-based product now. They aren't just these, we made 100 pairs and, it was a good marketing thing. No, these things are actually generating, depending on how big you can get volumes, they're actually generating real business. And so that's how a lot of folks who are doing designing and collabs are getting design fee, they're getting royalties. And if they, have their own retail, they can sell it and make money there, right? I think Travis Scott has a spot called Space out in Houston. And so he's able to distribute product through that. Kanye has Yeezy Supply. He's able to sell his product directly from his own platform. And so at the end of the day, if you can get scale and you can do it through that lane, that's how you're making your money.
So I have a deep question streets want to know. Does Nike care about bots on the sneakers app?
I can't answer that question.
Does Nike care that you cannot hit on the sneakers app? They can't care.
I'm taking L just like everyone else.
Streets want to know, man. Streets want to know.
What was the last sneaker you tried to get on sneakers?
Oh, the last ones I tried to get, I actually hit on. They were the blue fours, and I actually had the blue concrete four. I actually hit, but I was like, I didn't even really want them. I was just like, I'm gonna try. Hit.
Yeah,
I'm gonna just try. But the ones I actually want, taking L's, left and right.
L's.
Let's actually go, because there's something here now. Because I wonder, there are people really making money on these bots, and I'm like, okay, but if our non-melanated friends are building these bots and getting the bag, how do we cash in? Because apparently the system is built for people to be able to manipulate it in some way. So I wonder, how do we take advantage if we're not going to be the designers? What are the other opportunities to make money? Whether it be in the secondary market, whether it be, buying 1,000 pair of Air Force Ones and finding somebody in our community who's got a name, and then doing it for a rapper in our community. And like, how do we find interesting and creative ways to take advantage of the opportunity of creativity? Talk to me about some of the things that you've seen happen.
Yeah, totally. I've seen it come from the entrepreneurial side, right? And I think you got to think about it in multiple ways. You have Jock Slade, who's made a career out of creating content around sneakers and fashion, all on YouTube, right? And literally has a fan base that's in the millions at this point. And they show up for the videos, receives compensation through ads, through other monetization avenues. Has done work with Foot Locker, has done work with eBay, and you name it, right? And so that's one of the lanes, right? You can go through the lane of maybe the creator economy and do it that way. I think another way could be seeing yourself in retail, right? Yes, we know that the StockX exists and some of these other resale platforms that are out there, but folks also love brick and mortar, right? We also love supporting the businesses in our neighborhood. I'm in Portland right now, and Index is still alive and well, and it is a an aftermarket sneaker boutique, right? You can then, if you have passion for those things, then maybe you could take it into a different business you may not even think of. So, for example, Dead Stock Coffee here is a sneaker-inspired coffee shop, right? Who would have thought like that would be a thing, but it's one of the pillars of the community here. You can go down the realm of what we've done, right? We are at this current point, we have a podcast and we're expanding to some other things, but we've been able to take digital content and figure out how to monetize that content with different sponsors that support the work that we're doing in the audience that we're trying to cultivate and teach about different career possibilities. I think at the end of the day, the other thing that is most important is taking the time to figure out how can you learn more from other people that may be doing things creatively that you may be interested in, right? We talk to an unlimited amount of people, and we try to record that information so that that next generation, or even folks that are in career paths and want to pivot, right, from a creative standpoint, we try to give them as many examples as how you can go about doing that, because 9 times out of 10, you didn't grow up with that information, right? We didn't grow up in communities where you literally had, your mom's best friend may have been in, a VC, or may have been working at Facebook or working at Blavity, right? We didn't necessarily grow up with a lot of those networks. And so now it's important that either our generation shares that information back, or we can partner with these different corporations and organizations to make sure that information is readily available.
There was a question that came in on Facebook from Tamika Carroll. Says, how is sustainability playing a part in consumer choices? How does a sustainable company garner support? And does branding matter with regards to sustainable products? And I just want to throw this little caveat in here, because I remember when Nike came out with the "This is trash" like a year ago, which are leftover pieces from the cutting room floor, and they made other sneakers out. So how is sustainability playing a part in creative industries?
I think sustainability has a long way to go from the standpoint of how it actually resonates with consumers. And I think it is actually directly tied to diversity and inclusion, right? And so one of the things that I've been saying for a very long time when we talk about sustainability is, how is it humanized from the brand standpoint? How is that being humanized? Because when I think about sustainability, right, I think about, hey, I'm a Black man, and my sustainability as far as definition is actually my life, because I don't think about it when it comes to, I can't think about recycling that product, that bottle just yet. I can't think about the specific recycled shoe yet, because if I'm a kid in Baltimore, if I'm a kid growing up in New Orleans, I'm trying to figure out how I'm getting home alive. That to me is sustainability. So I think when we think about that, and we think about brands, you got to humanize it. Right now, it's not human. Right now, it is more of an elitist viewpoint that we can't really wrap our heads around when we're all trying to figure out the day-to-day of what's happening in this world, what's happening in the US.
So I could talk to you another hour. We got like a couple of minutes, but I want to make sure I get this question in before we get out of here, because we all remember, the Kanye conversation with Sway, and Sway was saying, why don't you just put your own money up in the house, Sway? And so we do have this conversation in our communities about, like, if you can't get a seat at your table, build your own table. And I wonder, while we laugh at the meme of the house Sway, what is it that causes Black-owned brands and smaller brands across the board, not just Black-owned brands, but brands, period, from being able to break through to being big houses like the Ralph Lauren's, the Calvin Klein's, and Michael Kors? Like, what is it that these smaller brands don't have that those brands have somewhat of a monopoly on, per Kanye?
Financing. Financing is the number one difference maker, because when you think about what a LVMH is able to do with a Louis Vuitton, and you think about Fenty, which I know was just rolled down, but the thing that's able to happen is they can show up at Fashion Week and they can spend millions of dollars on campaigns that circle the world. They can sign contracts with Virgil Abloh. They can have fashion shows where Kid Cudi walks down, right? All of these things cost money. Now, there is a scale to it, right? You don't necessarily have as much money as that and still be able to make waves. I think Telfer is a great example of how to build a brand and not have maybe access to the same amount of funding as Louis Vuitton, but Telfar is gaining a ton of traction. It is a community built brand and slowly built over time. And so when you think about what you have, creativity plays a huge part in it. Money doesn't always equal success, right? But money added on top of really great ideas could definitely add fire to the flame, fuel to the flames. And so, but at the end of the day, if you're asking me succinctly, that is the major difference, is funding. It takes money to build these brands. It takes, resources when you think about supply chain. It takes money to innovate and continue to come up with great ideas, to bring in the best talent for expanding. After you have one hot item, how do you continue to have multiple hot items? It takes those resources. If you need more visibility, maybe you want to bring in a personality like a creative director, or you want to bring in a celebrity, or you want to bring in an athlete to maybe wear that product. It takes funding and resources to do that. And for our businesses, we need more access to that type of capital, which is why it's great to see more of some of those options showing up, but we need more. It's not enough, because as you can see, there's such a vast difference in what's accessible to Black and brown businesses versus, the LVMHs that are out there that have been around for so long.